Hi, my name is Debby Montgomery Johnson, and I am the founder of The Woman Behind the Smile. I'm also a director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, or SCARS. I'm coming to you today because I was at a very important court date last week in Dallas, and I just felt the impression that it was necessary for me to explain that there is finally justice for at least one of our survivors, our victims of an online relationship scam. And I wanted to explain how I felt at the court, because for me, as a victim or survivor of an online relationship scam where I did not see justice done, or I haven't yet, my scammer was not caught as far as I know. But we tell people to report. We tell people to let the FBI know. And many of our women and men feel very discouraged because there doesn't seem to be any resolution or any acknowledgement that the scam even happened. So I wanted to do a little recap of a court case in Dallas and explain how I felt when I was there. So let me just preface this by saying the Eastern District of Texas, the United States Attorney's Office. I found a press release. This was in April of 2021, and it says North Texas man pleads guilty to his involvement in multi-million-dollar international fraud. It lists his name. You can look at this up on Google. He pled guilty without going to trial to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and he appeared before a magistrate in Texas. Let me just read this to you. It says the identification and disruption of white-collar fraud schemes and the vigorous prosecution of the criminals responsible for them is a top priority for the Eastern District of Texas. It is our mission to make internet communication and commerce as safe as possible, and rooting out online fraud schemes such as the one here are an integral part of that process. That was really important for me to see in person. As I went to Dallas a couple weeks ago, the court case had been postponed several times, which there are reasons for that, but as a victim, you're thinking, why doesn't this just happen? Well, the only good thing was that the defendant was in jail. He did not get out on his own recognizance. He did not have the funds to do that, which was nice. So he sat in jail for quite a long time. And let me just read the indictment on him, count one. It said, from in or about April of 2017 and continuing until about November 2019 in the Eastern District of Texas and elsewhere, the defendant knowingly and willfully devised and intended to devise a scheme, an artifice to defraud individuals to obtain money, funds, assets, and property owned by or under the custody and control of these individuals by means of false and fraudulent pretenses, false and fraudulent misrepresentations, and false and fraudulent promises. And for the purpose of executing this scheme, he transmitted and caused to be transmitted by way of wire communications in interstate commerce, writing, signals, signs, and pictures, and acted with specific intent to defraud. We all know how this happens. The scammers friend you on game sites, dating sites, social media sites, all different kinds of sites. They become your friend. They become your family. They become whatever you want them to be. And then they start asking. They start asking for money. They start asking for phones, for gift cards, for whatever they do to try to get you into their life. Okay, we all know how this happens. And for this purpose, this individual actually set up companies. And he created a business called Volane Executive Services and Auto. And he assumed that name. And he also set up at least 19 banking accounts, so that his 80 victims would be sending money to this company or to him directly. In the course of this scheme, he owned an independent bank account, and it gives the number ending, and it was in his name, doing business as Volane Executive Service and Auto, and it was listed as his residence in Texas. And he started to have victims send him money, which we know that happens. Okay. What was really extraordinary to me in this particular case is that, let me explain. When I got to the courthouse, I was meeting one of our survivors, and I had this sense of relief in a way, anxiety, excitement to finally see the process come to a completion in a way. I walked up to the courthouse and had a very good exchange with the guards, or the men at the entrance. I guess they were police, and very kind to us. And we walked in. I sat down in the courtroom, and if you think of Perry Mason or one of the courtroom shows, you walk in, and it was a fairly large courtroom with very few people in the back where we were. There were, on the left, as I'm looking, I'm going to paint this picture for you. I'm looking up at where the judge would sit, the front of the courtroom. And on my left, there was a table with the prosecutors. These were federal prosecutors from the Eastern District of Texas. There were 4 of them, a lead prosecutor and 3 others, plus an FBI agent that had led this investigation. Behind them was a forensic accountant. That was on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side was an empty table when we first got there. And soon thereafter, 2 marshals, federal marshals, walked in with a young man. He was in, if I recall, a burgundy jumpsuit with bright orange Croc sandals. That just seemed odd to me. With him were 2 attorneys, a female attorney and a male attorney. They sat down at the table. He had his back to us. That was the defendant. The case, we sat there for quite a while. It was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. About 9:30, the judge's assistant came out and said there was going to be a delay because the judge had to review some more information. Well, it turns out that the information the judge had to review were the victim impact statements that were delivered to him late. And when he came into the courtroom, we all stood up, and he proceeded to chastise the attorneys for not getting the information to him in a timely fashion. We were flabbergasted because the victim impact statements were probably one of the most important things for this sentencing hearing. So the judge went on, and as I looked around, I noticed there was a woman over to our left sitting on the family side of the courtroom. And we were thinking, okay, is she actually family members of the defendant or not? So we asked, is this person family? It turns out that woman was an agent for immigration. And the reason for immigration being there, which we found very interesting, is that on one of the counts in the indictment, it was actually count 2. It said, on or about August 10, 2017, the defendant, an alien in the United States, did knowingly and unlawfully enter into marriage with a United States citizen for the purpose of evading a provision in the immigration laws of the United States. And he actually got married. He paid an American to get married so that he could stay here in the States. He was from Nigeria, and he was living in Texas. So immigration was there I'm sure, to see what was going to go on, and hopefully to, in the event he was to get out, would immediately pick him up and deport him. We're hoping that after his time in prison, he will actually be deported at that point. So we sat there, and I was there for about 2 hours. It went on for another 4 hours after that. And I just want to explain. This is my feelings when I walked out of the courtroom. I wish I could have stayed all 4 hours. This was very powerful for me to see. The government presented an incredibly thorough case with evidence from Ring videos to FedEx packages. The scammers are manipulative and resourceful, but when they video themselves counting money to prove to their co-scammers that they actually received the funds, the video was a slam dunk evidence of what they were doing. I made a point of getting to know the lead prosecutor and the victim's advocate, and even gave one a copy of my book, The Woman Behind the Smile, so that they could understand a little bit better what the victims were feeling. They were genuinely appreciative of what we were doing, because out of the 80 victims from this one man, 11 wrote victim impact statements and only one showed up in person. It was that one there in person that I believe was the icing on the cupcake, when the judge, instead of giving what the prosecutors thought would only be 6 to 7 or maybe 5 to 6 years in prison, this defendant got 14 years for what he did, because it was a crime against the elderly. It was a crime against seniors. It was a crime against humanity. And the judge understood how important this was for the victims to get some sort of justice in this particular case. What was extraordinary to me is that although we don't hear what the FBI is doing on a regular basis, they had taken 2 years to put this case together. And they had so much information. They followed the money. They followed the packages. They followed where this man lived. That he was sending packages to his next door neighbor and then intercepting them before she would get them. He was setting up bank accounts where he was putting money in. He was buying cars, used cars, and then sending them overseas to auction them over there. And then that was essentially laundering the money that he was getting from the victims. It was very complex. This is not a stupid person. The scammers are, like we've said in SCAR's meetings, the scammers are very well trained, very manipulative in what they're doing, very calculated in what they're doing. They set up bank accounts using false identities. And I'm a former banker. This just floored me that they were so expert in setting up these accounts with fake identification, with false documentation, false addresses, false everything. And to finally have one of them in front of us being prosecuted for what he did to us, and I say us as a collective, because we may never see the person that scammed us sitting in jail. Use this as a vicarious experience, that as you saw the picture of my scammer in my book, this scammer who is now sitting in prison is there for the rest of them. And we can only hope that one by one, or 100 by 100, or 1,000 by 1,000, million by million, we will be able to see them all put away. Probably a Pollyanna point of view. But there was justice. And what I found so impressive when speaking with the lead prosecutors is that this is an important thing for them. As they said in the very beginning of their documentation, they want to show, at least in the state of Texas, that it is serious, that they want the internet to be a safe place for us to be, for our children, for our parents, grandparents, for all of us. They want it to be safe. And it's not right now. It's not a safe place in many situations. But this brought closure to me in a way nothing else has. By making people aware of what's happening, we are doing a service to our communities, to our fellow brothers and sisters, that if we can beware and be aware of what's happening in a bigger way and stop the scammers before they even get started, it's a whole lot easier than seeing our victims when they're broken. They've lost all their money. They've lost their homes. They've lost their dignity. They've lost their friends, their family. They've lost everything. And they don't want to speak up. To see our survivor come forward and speak up, to let that defendant know he had hurt her in such profound ways. And then to have him stand up, and this was extraordinary to her, is that he turned around and apologized to her. There might be a little bit of humanity in these people. I certainly hope so. I know with my scammer, when he apologized and confessed, I felt that for a moment that his conscience and his remorse were there. Now, some people might think that that's part of the scam. I don't know. But a man sitting in front of a judge and getting 14 years in prison, that was a smack in the face that what he did was wrong and what he did hurt people. So it's important for us to know that there is some closure for some of the victims. They may not get any money back. Most of us don't. But to know that there's an end to it, that there's a face to what happened, a face and a body to the story, and someone sitting in prison because of what he did is closure. And I hope that our victims that have this closure will be able to really now step forward in a bigger way with power inside, knowing that they had direct impact on what happened here. So it's important to make those reports to the police. It's important to speak up. It's important to let people know that there are scammers out there and they're hurting us in big ways. It's important to not click on those links that might lead us to the wrong place. It's important not to send money to somebody that we don't know, even though our heart thinks we know them. If we haven't met these people in person, seen them eye to eye, touch to touch, that's no guarantee that they're not a scammer. If we haven't and we are relying on online relationships, stop now. Read through this case. Look at what SCARS, the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, has to say about online relationships. And be careful. Just be careful. Because we don't want anybody to have to be there in court. But if you get an opportunity and you have been a victim and you've been given an opportunity to give a victim's impact, do it. Do it. I'll fly there to be with you. Just do it. It is really important. It's empowering. It's the first step. Well, it's the first step of many, but it's an important step to your recovery after a scam. So I just want to thank the Eastern District of Texas, the prosecutors, the victims coordinator, the victim coordinator, the FBI agents that worked so hard in putting this case together. Your efforts have given me hope that we can slow this down or stop it in some way. And I just want to say thank you to the organization of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, the survivors that are active, that are working to make people understand what has happened to them and what we don't want to happen to anybody else. So get your power back, guys. Stand up, speak up, woman up, as I say in many cases. Be there for others because this is so much bigger than we are. And I want to thank my one survivor that was there for her courage in stepping up and making a difference and impacting the life of others. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks very much.